So if you think that FTX and Celsius was bad, guys, several days ago, I received some headlines about the real estate crisis that is happening in China. And guys, this is a crisis that might collapse China itself, along with American middle class and retirees. There are multiple headwinds that are facing China right now, and I really think that China is probably going to collapse and fall into civil war before America folds. To start off this story, we really have to start with Evergrande, and you might have heard of it before. The founder is very much like Mashinsky from Celsius. So Hui Ka-yan is the founder, and what he did was ingenious. He borrowed money in order to buy land to start real estate projects, but before the buildings were even finished, he'd go to lenders to borrow more cash in order to finance the next real estate project. So Evergrande ran this scheme for over 2 decades, and if you think that wasn't bad, what they did was they tied employee bonuses to the requirement that they had to buy the company's wealth management products. So to use an analogy, imagine that your bonus is tied to the requirement that you have to buy your company's stock even though you know that the stock is junk. That's what happened. Due to COVID, poor policy, and a bunch of buildings not being finished, right now a lot of real estate developer companies have already gone bankrupt, and now who's left standing are the biggest real estate developer companies, and Evergrande is the biggest of them all. But what's happening right now is that they borrowed a bunch of debt, right, and they need to pay interest on that debt. But with what's happening, the Chinese people, they don't want to pay into this Ponzi anymore, and they're not interested in buying any real estate, and this basically freezes cash flow, and when the cash stops moving, that is when an economy dies. That is not the only problem. A bunch of young adults that graduated this year, about 23.6% of new graduates cannot find a job. That means that 11.6 million graduates, young adults, are left unemployed, and what they're doing is they're just mooching off their parents. And growing up Chinese, I can tell you that we have an inflated ego, just an end of story. And what a lot of people don't understand is supply and demand, and that goes double for these young adults because they don't understand that there is not a lot of supply of jobs, and a lot of them want to get into white-collar jobs, right? They have a degree, they deserve better is what they're thinking, so it's entitled thinking. And what's happening is that a lot of them want to get tech sector jobs, not realizing that there is more demand than supply of tech sector jobs, and not knowing that tech sector have been laying off people like crazy. And that's just not happening in China. It's happening all around the world. But because they have a degree, they deserve better. They don't want to get a blue-collar job, and that just adds on to the problem. So this youth unemployment problem isn't just happening in China. It's happening all around the world. In fact, my brother is one of them. For the last 2 or 3 years, he's just been sitting at home because he's unable to find a job. And when you just sit at home and laze around for 5 years, when the time comes when you actually do look for a job, people are going to be wondering, what have you been doing for those 5 years? And if you don't come up with a good answer, you're going to get passed on. And guys, employment is competitive out there. That means that for all the people that are unemployed, that means that they're going to be delaying certain life events. Let's say giving birth. That means that there's going to be less people in the workforce, which means that there's going to be less people to tax. And when there's less people to tax, that means that pensions will have to decrease. That means that seniors will have to take less money for their pensions because there's just not enough people to tax. So it's an entire economic disaster. If this Evergrande crisis and all of these unemployed youths do not get solved, we might actually see that China will collapse. And if China collapses, that's going to be a problem because they supply the entire world. They're the world supplier. So if they collapse, that means everything around the world is going to get more expensive than it already is. And at the end of the day, Americans will spend. If you have a credit card, they will spend. It's an addiction. And guys, remember that our credit card bill recently crossed $1 trillion. And even if prices go up, you think we're going to stop? Heck no. Americans and people around the world will spend regardless of their future or their retirement. And if you're curious about how this will affect Social Security and your future retirement, then you might want to check out this video here.